Modern architectural masterpiece perched on the hills overlooking the city, was supposed to be a sanctuary. Instead, it felt like a museum where he was both the curator and the sole exhibit. He walked to the window, looking down at the sprawling grounds below. The staff would be arriving soon. The gardeners, the cleaners, the security team. They moved around the property like ghosts, efficient and invisible. They respected him, certainly. They feared disappointing him. But no one knew him. Not really. He poured himself a glass of water from the crystal decanter on the side table, his hand steady. He prided himself on stability. Emotions were variables, and variables could be managed. But lately, the equation of his life wasn't balancing. He thought about the journey, the sacrifices. He had missed birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet Sundays, all in the name of building a legacy. He told himself it was for Elena, for their future. But looking at the empty side of the bed, he wondered if there was anyone left to share that future with. Downstairs, the kitchen was a cavern of stainless steel and white quartz. A single-place setting was waiting for him at the long dining table. Elena was already there, standing by the coffee machine. She looked beautiful, as she always did. Her hair was swept back, her posture elegant. But there was a distance in her eyes, a focal point somewhere beyond the room, beyond him. She wore a robe that slipped slightly off her shoulder, revealing the fragility he used to protect. Now, he wasn't sure if she wanted his protection anymore. "Good morning, Arthur," she said, her voice soft, lacking any real warmth. She didn't turn to face him fully. She was holding her mug with both hands, as if seeking warmth from the ceramic. "Good morning, Elena," he replied, taking his seat. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the refrigerator and the clink of his spoon against the ceramic bowl. He watched her. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving rapidly across the screen. A small smile touched her lips, fleeting in private, before she noticed his gaze and locked the screen, sliding the device into her pocket. The movement was quick, almost jerky. It was a gesture of concealment. "Anything interesting?" Arthur asked. He tried to keep his tone light, casual. He didn't want to seem suspicious. He didn't want to seem like a man who was starving for connection, begging for scraps of attention from his own wife. "Just the news," she lied. He knew it was a lie. He knew the cadence of her voice when she was hiding something. They had been married for 20 years. He knew the rhythm of her breathing when she was calm versus when she was anxious. Today, she was anxious. Her foot tapped lightly against the floor, a nervous tic she hadn't had in years. "Are you feeling better?" he asked, referring to her headache from the night before. He wanted to reach out to touch her hand, but the table was too wide, and the gap between them felt like a canyon. "Yes, much better. I have lunch with the charity committee today. I won't be home until late." Again, Arthur paused, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. "That's the third event this week, Elena. I thought we were going to have dinner together. I booked that table at Leclerc. Months ago." Elena finally looked at him, and for a moment he saw a flash of guilt in her eyes, quickly masked by defensiveness. Her shoulders stiffened. "Arthur, you know how important this foundation is to me. You're always busy. I have to fill my time somehow. I can't just wait around for you to finish your calls. I have a life too." The words stung more than he expected. They were true, weren't they? He was always busy. He had built this life to provide for her, to give her everything she could possibly want. And in doing so, he had absented himself from it. He put the fork down. The metal clattered loudly in the quiet room. "I just miss you," he said, the admission slipping out before he could check it. It was vulnerable, something he rarely allowed himself to be. In business, vulnerability was weakness. In marriage, he was learning. It was a necessity he had neglected. Elena's expression softened, but she didn't reach for his hand. She didn't close the distance. She looked at the clock on the wall. "I know," she said quietly. "I have to go. The car is waiting." She walked out of the kitchen, the sound of her heels clicking against the floor fading down the hallway. Arthur sat alone in the vast room. The food in front of him suddenly looked unappetizing. He pushed the plate away. This was the cost, he told himself. This was the price of the view, the security, the legacy. But why did it feel like he was losing something far more valuable than money? He finished his coffee, the bitterness lingering on his tongue. He left for the office 20 minutes later. The drive was in the back of his armored sedan, watching the city wake up. The skyline was a testament to his influence. Several of those buildings bore his company's logo. His phone buzzed constantly. Emails, stock updates, crisis management in the Asian sector. He handled them all with swift, decisive commands. This was where he was comfortable. Here, problems had solutions. Here, effort yielded results. But as the car pulled into the underground garage of the Sterling Tower, he couldn't shake the image of Elena's private smile over her phone. The day passed in a blur of meetings. Arthur was a shark. In the water, circling, negotiating, acquiring. His employees admired his focus. They saw a man who never tired, never wavered. They didn't see the way his eyes drifted to the window during the lunch meeting, watching the couples walking in the park below. They didn't see the emptiness that settled in his chest when his phone remained silent throughout the afternoon. No messages from Elena. No check-ins. Just the formal calendar invitation for the gala next month. During a negotiation with a potential partner, Arthur found himself distracted. The man across the table was talking about synergy and growth, but Arthur was thinking about the sound of Elena's voice when she said, "I know." It lacked conviction. It lacked love. By the time he returned home, the sun had set. The house was lit by automated sensors, lights turning on as he walked through the halls, guiding him through the darkness. It felt mechanical, lifeless. He loosened his tie as he entered the living room. Elena was there, sitting on the sofa, a glass of wine in her hand. She had changed into casual clothes, but she wasn't reading or watching television. She was just staring at the fireplace, the gas flames flickering without heat. She looked small in the large room, swallowed by the shadows. "You're home early," she said, not turning around. Her voice was tired. "The merger was signed faster than expected," Arthur replied, pouring himself a drink. He stood by the bar, watching her back. There was a tension in her shoulders, a rigidity that hadn't been there in years. "How was the charity lunch?" "Fine. Productive." She took a sip of wine, her hand trembling slightly. "Elena," he said, his voice low. He set his glass down. "We need to talk." She turned then, her eyes wide, defensive again. She pulled her legs up onto the sofa, creating a barrier. "About what, Arthur? I'm tired. It's been a long day. Can we not do this tonight about us?" he said. He walked over and sat on the coffee table in front of her, forcing her to look at him. He needed to see her eyes. He needed to know if there was still truth in them. "I feel like I'm living with a stranger. You're distant. You're secretive. You sleep in another room. I know something is wrong. Is it me? Have I failed you? Tell me, and I will fix it. I can fix anything." Elena looked down at her wine glass, swirling the liquid. The red wine caught the light from the fire. "It's not you, Arthur. You're perfect. You provide everything. There's nothing to want for. The house, the cars, the trips. It's all perfect. Then why are you unhappy?" His voice cracked slightly. He hated the sound of it. "Because providing isn't loving," she whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. They settled into the room like dust. "You provide a life, Arthur, but you don't live it with me. And lately, I feel like I'm disappearing in this house. I need to feel seen. I need to feel like I matter to you more than the company." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't an accusation of infidelity, not explicitly. It was an accusation of neglect. And yet, the secrecy, the phone, the late nights, they gnawed at him. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe it was just his fault. But the instinct that had saved him in business was screaming now. "I want to fix it," he said. "Tell me how. I can change my schedule. I can step back. I can sell the company if that's what it takes." "It's not about the schedule," she said, standing up and walking past him. She avoided his touch. "It's about the presence. And I don't know if you know how to give that anymore. Good night, Arthur." She left him alone in the living room. The fire crackled. The house was silent again. Arthur sat there for a long time, staring into the flames. He was a man who could move markets, who could dictate terms to governments, but he couldn't fix the silence in his own home. He took a sip of his drink, the alcohol burning slightly as it went down. He thought about hiring someone to follow her. He thought about demanding to see her phone. But that wasn't who he was. He was a man of integrity. He believed in evidence, not paranoia. He valued truth, even when it hurt. But the seed of doubt had been planted. As he walked up the grand staircase to the master bedroom, passing the closed door of the guest suite where his wife was sleeping, he felt a shift in the air. The stability he prized so much was cracking. He went to his study instead of the bedroom. He sat at his desk, the leather chair creaking under his weight. He opened his laptop, not to work, but to stare at the blank screen. The cursor blinked, mocking him. He thought about the title people gave him. The Billionaire. The Titan. It sounded powerful. But tonight, it felt like a cage. He realized that if he lost Elena, He would still have the money, the houses, the cars. But he would have no one to share it with. And that thought was more terrifying than any business failure he had ever faced. He leaned back, closing his eyes, listening to the hum of the house. Somewhere in the silence, a phone buzzed. It wasn't his. It came from down the hall. A single vibration. Then another. Persistent. Arthur's eyes opened. He didn't move. He just listened. His heart beat faster. A rhythm he couldn't control. Who was messaging his wife at 11 o'clock at night. He waited. The buzzing stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. He knew, with a certainty that settled in his gut like a stone, that the routine was broken. The isolation was no longer just his burden. It was shared with someone else. Someone who wasn't him. He stood up and walked to the window again, looking out at the city lights. They twinkled like distant stars, cold and unreachable. He placed his hand against the glass. Tomorrow, he decided, he would not just watch. He would know. He would find the truth, not to destroy, but to understand. But for tonight, he had to endure the quiet, the cold, and the growing suspicion that the empire he built was standing on foundations of sand. He turned off the desk lamp, up briefly with a name she had memorized but dared not speak aloud. Julian. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. She lay there, staring at the ornate ceiling molding, feeling the weight of the silk sheets pressing down on her chest. The room was perfect, just like everything else in this house. The temperature was controlled, the air smelled of lavender and expensive linen, and the furniture was curated by designers who knew exactly what wealth looked like. But it felt like a cage. A gilded, beautiful cage where she was the prize on display, never the owner. She waited until the house settled completely, until she was sure Arthur was still in his study, buried in his work or his thoughts. Only then did she slide her hand across the cool surface of the nightstand and pick up the phone. The message was simple: thinking of you. Hope you're okay. 3 words. Hope you're okay. They carried more warmth than anything Arthur had said to her in months. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye, hot and shameful. She wiped it away quickly, as if the darkness could see her weakness. She wasn't supposed to be unhappy. She was Elena Sterling. She had the dress, the car, the influence. People looked at her with envy. They saw the galas, the charity boards, the smiles captured by paparazzi. They didn't see the nights spent talking to the ceiling, wondering if she had become a ghost in her own life. Morning came too quickly. The automated curtains opened with a soft whir, flooding the room with harsh sunlight. Elena sat up, rubbing her temples. She had to put on the mask today. It was a routine she had perfected over the years. She walked to the ensuite bathroom, avoiding the mirror at first. When she finally looked, she saw the fatigue etched around her eyes. She applied her makeup with steady hands, covering the darkness, painting on the smile that the world expected. The foundation was thick, the lipstick a perfect shade of rose. It was armor. She chose a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year, a flowing silk number that whispered when she moved. It was beautiful. It was empty. Downstairs, the kitchen was already active. Arthur was there again. He was reading something on a tablet, a cup of black coffee untouched beside him. He looked up as she entered. The air between them was thick, charged with the unsaid words from the night before. He had heard the phone. She knew he had. He was too sharp, too attuned to details to miss something like that. But he said nothing. He just watched her, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Good morning," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She moved to the coffee machine, needing something to do with her hands. "Did you sleep well?" Arthur asked. His tone was neutral, but there was an edge to it, a subtle probe. Eventually, she replied, pouring the coffee. She didn't turn to face him. The house was quiet. Yes, quiet. Arthur set the tablet down. The sound was sharp in the large room. "Elena, about last night. What I said, about being present. I meant it. I can make changes." Elena turned then, leaning against the counter. She looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the lines on his face, the genuine desire to fix things, but also the rigidity that had built up over decades. He wanted to fix her like he fixed a broken merger. He wanted to apply a solution to a feeling. "Arthur," she said softly, "you can't schedule presence. You can't buy intimacy. It's not a transaction." "Then tell me what it is," he insisted, standing up. He took a step toward her, but stopped when she flinched slightly. The movement was involuntary, a reflex of someone expecting a blow, even though Arthur had never raised a hand to her. The emotional distance felt physical. "I want to understand, but you have to let me in." You have to stop shutting me out. I'm not shutting you out, she lied. The guilt tasted like bile in her throat. I'm just trying to find myself. Sometimes I feel like I'm just an extension of you. The wife of Arthur Sterling. I don't know who Elena is anymore without the last name. Arthur looked hurt. The mask slipped, revealing the vulnerability he hid from the world. You are Elena. You have always been Elena. Don't you think I know that, she challenged, her voice rising slightly. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted to do, not what event I was attending, not what charity I was supporting? What I wanted. For me. Arthur opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. The silence stretched, agonizing and loud. He looked down at his hands, clenched at his sides. I thought providing was enough, he murmured, more to himself than to her. It's not, she said. She picked up her coffee cup. I have to go. The foundation meeting. Elena, he called out as she turned to leave. She paused but didn't look back. Be careful. The warning hung in the air. Was he talking about the city, the sun, or was he talking about the secret she was carrying she didn't answer? She walked out of the kitchen, her heels clicking on the marble, each step sounding like a countdown. In the car, the silence was absolute. The driver knew better than to speak to her when she was in this mood. She looked out the window as the city passed by. Skyscrapers, parks, people rushing to work. Lives that seemed real, messy, and authentic. She pulled her phone from her purse. She opened the message thread with Julian. He was an old friend, someone from before the money, before the empire. He listened. He asked questions. He made her feel like a person, not an asset. But looking at the messages now, in the cold light of day, she felt a pang of fear. This was dangerous. Not because of Arthur's money, but because of the truth. She was seeking warmth outside because the hearth at home had gone cold. She typed a reply, I'm okay. Just complicated. She hit send before she could delete it. Immediately, the 3 dots appeared. He was waiting. I'm here if you need to talk. Always. She put the phone away, pressing her hand against her chest. She could feel her heart beating fast. It was exhilarating and terrifying. She arrived at the foundation office, a sleek building in the downtown district. She spent the next 4 hours in meetings, discussing grants and budgets. She was efficient, sharp, and commanding. People praised her insight. She smiled and thanked them. But inside, she was screaming. Every compliment felt like a reminder of the facade. They were praising the image, not the woman. During a break, she stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cool. She leaned against the railing, looking out at the traffic below. Her phone buzzed again. It wasn't Julian this time. It was a notification from the home security system. Arthur's office had accessed the guest suite logs. Her breath hitched. She stared at the screen. Why would he check the logs? Was he tracking her movements in the house? The paranoia she had been trying to suppress surged forward. She wasn't just hiding an emotional connection. She was hiding in her own home. She went back inside, forcing a smile for her assistant. Cancel my afternoon, she said. I'm not feeling well. Again, Mrs. Sterling, the assistant asked, concern in her voice. You've canceled 3 times this week. I know, Elena said, her voice tight. Just cancel it. She left the building, not going home. She couldn't face the house yet. She told the driver to take her to the park. She needed to be somewhere public, somewhere where she wasn't Mrs. Sterling. She walked among the trees, pulling her coat tight around her. She saw a couple sitting on a bench, sharing a sandwich, laughing. They looked poor compared to her, but they looked connected. She envied them. She would trade all the diamonds in her vault for one moment of that genuine laughter with her husband. But the bridge between them had burned down, and she wasn't sure if she had the courage to build it back, or if she had already walked too far down the other path. Her phone rang. It was Arthur. She let it go to voicemail. She couldn't speak to him right now. She couldn't lie again. The voicemail notification popped up seconds later. She didn't listen to it. She knew what it would be. Concern masked as control. Questions masked as care. She sat on a bench, watching the ducks on the pond. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the grass. She thought about Julian. He offered understanding. Arthur offered solutions. She was starving for understanding. But at what cost? As the sky turned purple, she knew she had to go back. The house was waiting. The silence was waiting. And Arthur was waiting. She signaled the driver. As the car moved through the streets, heading back to the hills, she felt a sense of dread settling in her stomach. Something was shifting. The stability she had taken for granted, even in its coldness, was fracturing. She looked at her reflection in the window. The perfect wife. The perfect life. The perfect lie. She touched the glass, as if trying to reach the woman on the other side. "Who are you?" she whispered to herself. The car turned into the driveway of the mansion. The lights were on. Every single one. It looked like a beacon, calling her home. But as the gates closed behind her, sealing her in, it felt less like a homecoming and more like a lock clicking into place. She took a deep breath, steadying herself for the performance ahead. The door opened and she stepped out, ready to face the music, and she knew he was there. She could feel his presence before she saw him, a shift in the atmospheric pressure of the room. Arthur stepped out from the shadows of the study, his silhouette framed by the soft light spilling from behind him. He didn't turn on the overhead lights. He preferred the darkness. It hid the expressions he couldn't quite control. "You were gone for 4 hours," Arthur said. His voice was calm, devoid of accusation, which made it far more terrifying. He walked toward her, his steps silent on the marble floor. "The foundation office called. They said you canceled your meeting at noon." Elena froze, her hand still holding the strap of her bag. She didn't turn around immediately. She needed a moment to compose her face, to arrange the muscles into the mask of innocence she had worn for so long. When she finally faced him, her eyes were wide, feigning confusion. "Did they? I must have missed the call. I went for a walk. I needed air, Arthur." The office was suffocating. "A walk?" Arthur repeated. He stopped a few feet away from her. He searched her face, looking for the telltale signs of a lie. He knew her better than anyone. He knew the way her nose crinkled when she was telling the truth, the way her eyes darted to the left when she was constructing a fiction. Today, her eyes were steady. Too steady. "In the city alone, yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is that a crime?" "No," Arthur replied, though the word felt like ash in his mouth. "No crime. Just unusual." He reached out, almost touching her arm, but he pulled back at the last second. He noticed she flinched, a microscopic recoil that spoke volumes. She was guarding herself. Against him. "Dinner is at 8. I'll be in the study if you need me." He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the foyer. He didn't look back, but he felt her eyes on his back until he disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. Upstairs, in the safety of his study, Arthur leaned against the closed door and closed his eyes. He felt sick. It wasn't anger yet. It was a deep, gnawing sorrow. He walked to his desk and opened the drawer where he kept a small notebook. He wasn't a man who relied on memory for important things, and lately, the details of his wife's life felt critically important. He picked up his pen and wrote Tuesday. Left house 1 p.m. Returned 5 p.m. Claimed walk. Foundation says no meeting. He stared at the words. They looked innocent on paper. Just a scheduled discrepancy. But to Arthur, they were cracks in a dam. Over the next week, the cracks widened. He began to watch her not as a husband, but as an observer. He noticed the way she held her phone now. Previously, she had left it on the counter, on the nightstand everywhere. Now it was an extension of her hand. She took it to the bathroom. She took it to the garden. When it buzzed, she didn't glance at it casually. She snapped it up with an urgency that betrayed its importance. One evening, they were sitting in the living room, a rare occurrence where they were both present without an agenda. Arthur was reading a report. Elena was scrolling through her feed. The television was on, providing a background hum of noise. Suddenly, Elena's phone vibrated on the coffee table. She was laughing at something on the screen, a genuine, bright sound that Arthur hadn't heard directed at him in months. The phone buzzed again. Her smile vanished instantly. She flipped the phone face down on the table. "Who was that?" Arthur asked. He didn't look up from his report. He kept his voice casual, light. "No one," Elena said too quickly. "Just a spam message." "Spam messages don't make you smile," Arthur noted, finally lifting his eyes. He looked at the phone, then at her. "You looked happy." Elena shifted on the sofa, pulling a throw blanket over her legs. "It was a meme. From a friend. You know how it is." "I do," Arthur said. "I just haven't seen you smile like that in a long time. I was wondering who managed to bring it out of you." The air in the room grew thick. Elena stood up abruptly. "I'm tired, Arthur. I think I'll go to bed." "It's 7 o'clock, he pointed out. "I have a headache," she said, repeating the excuse from weeks ago. She picked up her phone, clutching it to her chest like a shield, and walked out of the room without looking back. Arthur listened to her footsteps ascend the stairs. He waited until he heard the bedroom door click shut before he let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He looked at the empty space on the sofa where she had been sitting. It was still warm. He stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were blinking again, mocking him. He thought about the changes. The new password on her iPad. The sudden interest in a gym that was on the other side of the city, far from their home. The late-night texts that she claimed were work-related, but her foundation didn't operate at midnight. It was a pattern, a mosaic of small lies that formed a picture he was afraid to look at directly. The following Thursday, Arthur decided to test the waters. He told his secretary to cancel his afternoon meetings. He told Elena he was going to be out of town for a business trip until Friday. He watched her reaction closely when he told her at breakfast. Her eyes lit up, just for a fraction of a second, before she masked it with concern. "Oh," she said, stirring her coffee. "That's sudden. Where are you going?" "Chicago," Arthur lied. "Merger discussion. I'll be back Friday evening." "Safe travels," she said. She didn't ask when his flight was. She didn't offer to pack for him. She just seemed relieved. Arthur left the house at his usual time, but he didn't go to the office. He instructed his driver to take him to the private garage across the street from their estate. He waited there, watching the house through the tinted windows of the car. He felt like a stranger in his own life, a voyeur spying on his marriage. It was humiliating. He was a man who commanded respect, yet here he was, hiding in a car, hoping to catch a glimpse of his wife's routine. At 1:30 p.m., Elena left the house. She wasn't dressed for a charity meeting. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair tied back. She looked casual, relaxed. She got into her car and drove away. Arthur signaled his driver. "Follow her. Keep a distance." "Yes, sir," the driver said. He was a professional. He asked no questions. They followed her through the city, weaving through traffic. Arthur's heart pounded in his chest. He felt guilty, invasive, but the need to know was overpowering the shame. Where was she going? Who was she meeting? Was it really just a walk they drove for 20 minutes, heading toward the outskirts, away from the business district, away from the foundation offices? They ended up in a quiet residential area, lined with trees and older homes. Elena parked her car in front of a small cafe. It wasn't a place for high society. It was cozy, unassuming. Arthur's car pulled over a block away. He watched through the binoculars his driver kept in the glove compartment. He saw Elena get out of the car. She looked around, checking her surroundings, before walking into the cafe. Arthur sat back in the leather seat, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't go in. He couldn't. If he went in there and saw her with someone, there was no going back. The ignorance was a shelter, however fragile. He stayed in the car for an hour. He watched the door. He saw people come and go. He saw Elena come out at 2:45 p.m. She was smiling again. That same smile. She looked at her phone, typed something quickly, and got back into her car. "Home," Arthur whispered to the driver. His voice was rough. "Yes, sir." The drive back was silent. Arthur stared out the window, watching the world blur by. He felt a coldness spreading through his chest, starting at his heart and moving to his extremities. He wasn't angry. He was devastated. The evidence was circumstantial, but to him, it was conclusive. She wasn't working. She wasn't walking. She was meeting someone. Someone who made her smile. Someone who made her feel alive. And it wasn't him. When he arrived home, he went straight to the study. He didn't wait for her. He needed to be there when she returned, to see if she would lie to his face again. He poured himself a drink, his hand steady now. The shock had passed, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He sat in his chair, waiting. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second marking the distance between who they were and who they had become. At 3:30 p.m., the front door opened. He heard her humming. She was happy. She walked into the study, surprised to see him. "Arthur, I thought you were in Chicago." "I came back early," he said. He didn't stand up. He swirled the liquid in his glass. The meeting was shorter than expected. Elena stopped in the doorway. Her hand went to her throat, a subconscious gesture of protection. "Oh, I didn't know." "Clearly," Arthur said. He looked at her, his eyes piercing. "How was your day?" "Fine," she said. "Quiet. I just stayed home." The lie was so blatant, so effortless, that it took his breath away. She was standing there, looking him in the eye and rewriting reality. He realized then that this wasn't just about a mistake. This was a double life. She had built a world where he didn't exist, and she was protecting it fiercely. "Stayed home," Arthur repeated. He stood up slowly. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them. Elena took a step back. "You look flushed, Elena." "Did you get some fresh air?" "A little," she stammered. "In the garden." Arthur stopped inches from her. He could smell her perfume. It was the same scent she had worn for years, but today it smelled different. It smelled like secrets. "The garden," he said softly. "It's nice this time of year. Peaceful." "Yes," she whispered. Arthur turned away from her. He couldn't look at her anymore. If he did, he might scream. He might beg. He might break. "Dinner is at 8, he said, repeating the words from days ago. "Don't be late." He walked past her, out of the study, leaving her standing alone in the room. He went upstairs to their bedroom, but he didn't go in. He went to the guest room, the one she had been sleeping in. He stood in the doorway, looking at the made bed. He realized then that the conflict wasn't just about where she was going. It was about where she was emotionally. She had left him long before she ever walked out the door. The suspicion was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. He knew what he had to do next. He couldn't confront her yet. Not until he knew the whole truth. Not until he knew who was making her smile. He closed the guest room door and walked back to his study. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A private investigator. He needed to know everything. He motioned. There was no going back. Once he knew the name, once he saw the face, the marriage would never be the same. It would either break or transform into something unrecognizable. He poured another drink, the ice clinking softly against the crystal. He thought about the friends they had shared over the years. The couples who came for dinner, the galas they attended together. Who could it be someone close enough to know her schedule, but distant enough to keep it secret? The possibilities churned in his mind, each one more painful than the last. The next day was gray, the sky hanging low over the city like a bruised ceiling. Elena woke with a sense of foreboding. The lie she had told Arthur yesterday sat in her stomach like a stone. She had told him she was home. He had known. She could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at her not with anger, but with a devastating disappointment. She dressed slowly, choosing clothes that felt like a uniform. She needed to see Julian. She needed to hear a voice that didn't sound like a judgment. She met him at the same cafe. It had become their sanctuary, a neutral ground where the sterling name meant nothing to the barista, where the paparazzi didn't linger. Julian was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee steaming on the table. He was a man of 45, with kind eyes and a smile that had remained unchanged since college. He had been Arthur's friend first, decades ago, before the billions, before the tower. He remembered Elena when she was just an artist with paint on her hands, not a philanthropist with a board of directors. "You look tired," Julian said as she slid into the seat opposite him. He didn't reach for her hand, not here, not in public. But his voice was soft, a blanket wrapped around her frayed nerves. "I didn't sleep," Elena admitted, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. The heat seeped into her palms, a small comfort. "Arthur knows, Julian. Or at least he suspects. He was home when I said I wasn't." Julian's expression tightened. He looked out the window, watching the rain begin to streak the glass. "Did he confront you? No. He just looked at me. It was worse than shouting. He said he came back early from Chicago. He knows I lied." Elena took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding her. "I feel like I'm drowning. Every time I walk into that house, I feel like I'm suffocating. But when I lie to him, I feel like I'm betraying the only person who ever tried to build a life for me." "You aren't betraying him, Elena," Julian said, turning back to her. His eyes were intense, focused solely on her. "You're trying to survive. There's a difference. Arthur built a cage and called it a home. You're just looking for a door." "It feels like a betrayal," she whispered. "You were his friend first. Does that bother you that we're doing this?" Julian sighed, leaning back. He looked tired too. The weight of the secret was on his shoulders as well. "Arthur and we grew apart long before this. He changed, Elena. The man I knew wanted to build things. The man he became only wants to own them. Including you." He reached across the table then, covering her hand with his. It was a simple gesture, but it sent a shock through her system. It was human contact, devoid of transaction. "I care about you. I have for a long time. I hated watching you fade away. If being here, listening to you, helps you breathe again, then I don't regret it." Elena looked down at their hands. His was warm, rougher than Arthur's manicured fingers. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I want to fix it. Sometimes I think I just want to run." "Then run," Julian said quietly. "You have the means. You have the strength. You just need to believe you deserve more than being a decoration in his museum." They sat there for an hour, talking about everything and nothing. They talked about books, about the rain, about the memories of who they used to be. For that hour, Elena wasn't Mrs. Sterling. She was just Elena. And Julian wasn't the friend of her husband. He was just Julian. When they parted ways, she felt a little lighter, but the guilt returned the moment she stepped back into her car. The duality was tearing her apart. Meanwhile, across the city, Arthur sat in his office at Sterling Tower. The envelope lay on his desk, plain white, unmarked. The PI had delivered it personally. Arthur stared at it for 10 minutes before he opened it. He knew that opening it would change the trajectory of his life. He slid the photos out. The first one was of the cafe. The timestamp was from yesterday. The second photo was clearer. It showed Elena laughing, and it showed the man sitting across from her. Arthur felt the air leave the room. He knew that face. He had played golf with him. He had lent him money for a startup once. He had trusted him with his wife's safety when he traveled. Julian. Of all the people in the world, it had to be Julian. The betrayal wasn't just romantic, it was foundational. It shook the ground beneath his feet. These were the two people he thought he knew best. He picked up the photo, studying Julian's expression. He looked happy. He looked at Elena the way Arthur used to look at her, before the work, before the money, before the silence. Arthur felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, but he suppressed it. He set the photo down. He wouldn't react like a jealous boy. He was Arthur Sterling. He would handle this with precision. He pressed the intercom on his phone. "Cancel my lunch," he said to his secretary, "and clear my schedule for the rest of the week." "Sir, you have the board meeting on Thursday," she replied. "Cancel it," Arthur said. "Tell them I have a personal matter." He leaned back in his chair, looking out at the city. He thought about Julian's words from years ago, at Arthur's wedding. "Take care of her, Artie. She's the best thing that ever happened to you." Arthur had thought he was taking care of her. He had given her security. He had given her status. But he hadn't given himself. And now, someone else was filling that void. The rain started outside, tapping against the glass. Arthur picked up his phone. He scrolled to Julian's number. He hovered his thumb over the call button. He could call him. He could scream. He could demand an explanation. But what would that achieve? It would make them enemies. It would make Elena choose a side. And Arthur wasn't sure she wouldn't choose Julian. The thought was unbearable. He put the phone down. Instead, he opened his laptop. He began to review his assets. Not the company assets, but the personal ones. The trusts, the properties, the accounts in Elena's name. He needed to understand the landscape. If this was going to end, it would end on his terms. But as he typed, he paused. He thought about Elena's face when she lied to him. She hadn't looked triumphant. She had looked scared. She wasn't trying to destroy him. She was trying to find herself. The distinction mattered. It mattered a lot. He closed the laptop. He stood up and walked to the window. The city was gray, washed in rain. He felt older than he had this morning. The investigation was over. He had the name. He had the proof. But the real work was just beginning. How do you confront a ghost? How do you fight for a wife who has already emotionally left the building? He decided he wouldn't confront them today. He needed to think. He needed to plan. He grabbed his coat and left the office. He didn't go home. He drove to the park, the same one Elena had visited days ago. He walked along the path, hands in his pockets, watching the couples huddle under umbrellas. He saw a man wipe rain from a woman's face. A simple gesture. Arthur realized he couldn't remember the last time he had done something like that for Elena. He had bought her jewelry instead. He had bought her cars instead. He had bought everything except his own time. The rain soaked his shoulders, but he didn't care. He walked until his shoes were wet, until the cold seeped into his bones. It felt like penance. When he returned to the car, he sat in the driver's seat for a long time. He looked at the photo of Julian and Elena on the passenger seat. He picked it up again. Why him? He asked the empty car. Why not just leave? Why the secrecy? The answer came to him slowly. Because leaving meant losing the life she knew. The secrecy meant she wanted to keep both. She wanted the security of the marriage and the warmth of the friendship. She was trying to have it all, just as he had tried to have it all with his business. They were more alike than he wanted to admit. He started the engine. He would go home. He would sit at the dinner table. He would wait. He wouldn't ambush them. He would let the truth come to him. But he needed to be ready. He drove back to the mansion, the wipers swishing rhythmically against the rain. The house loomed ahead, lights glowing warmly against the storm. It looked inviting, but he knew the cold that lived inside. When he entered, the house was quiet. Elena was in the living room, reading a book. She looked up when he came in. She saw the rain on his coat, the dampness in his hair. She saw the exhaustion in his face. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The photo was in his pocket, burning against his leg. He knew everything. She knew he suspected. The air between them was charged, a storm waiting to break. "You're wet," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I went for a walk," Arthur replied. He used her own excuse. The irony wasn't lost on him. "It helps to clear the head." "Yes," she said, closing her book. "It does." Arthur walked over to the fireplace. He didn't turn to look at her. "Julian called me today," he lied. He wanted to see her reaction. He wanted to test the water. Elena froze. He could hear her breath catch. He did. "What about business?" "Old times." Arthur turned then. He looked her in the eye. "He asked about you. Said he hadn't seen you in a while." The lie hung in the air. Elena's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. She knew he was testing her. "Yes. It's been a while. We're all so busy." "Are we?" Arthur asked. He took a step toward her. "Busy enough to lose track of friends, busy enough to lose track of each other." Elena stood up. The book slipped from her lap onto the cushion. "Arthur, please. Don't do this." "Do what he asks," softly. "Ask questions, care about where you are, interrogate me," she said. Her voice was stronger now, fueled by fear. "I am not a company asset, Arthur. You can't audit my life." "I'm not auditing," he said. "I'm trying to understand. Because I feel like I'm losing you. And I don't know to who. Or to what." Elena looked at him, and for a second the mask slipped. He saw the pain there. The confusion. "You lost me a long time ago, Arthur. Not to someone else. To yourself. You chose the work. You chose the empire. I was just there." She walked past him, heading for the stairs. Arthur didn't stop her. He let her go. He stood by the fire, listening to her footsteps fade. He reached into his pocket and touched the edge of the photo. He knew now. It wasn't just about Julian. It was about the void Arthur had created. Julian was just the person who happened to be standing there when Elena fell. He threw the log into the fire. It crackled, sending sparks up the chimney. He would not fire Julian. He would not divorce Elena tomorrow. He would wait. He would watch. And he would decide what kind of man he wanted to be when the end finally came. The rain silent. Elena had retreated to her sanctuary, the guest suite, leaving Arthur alone with the truth burning in his pocket. He didn't follow her. He didn't throw the photo into the flames. Instead, he walked back to his desk and sat down. The envelope from the private investigator lay open. The contents spread out like a diagnosis of a terminal illness. He had the evidence. He had the name. He had the proof of the betrayal. But he didn't have the understanding. Vengeance was easy. He was a billionaire. He could ruin Julian's business with a single phone call. He could freeze Elena's accounts, drag her through the courts, expose them to the press that waited like vultures outside the gates. He could destroy them. It would be satisfying in a primal way. It would restore his pride. But as he looked at the photo of Elena laughing with Julian, he didn't feel pride. He felt a profound, aching loss. Destroying them wouldn't bring back the woman in the picture. It wouldn't fill the silence in the house. If he acted out of anger, he would be no better than a scorned child. He needed to act as a man who valued truth over victory. He picked up his phone and dialed the number for Marcus, the investigator. It was late, but Marcus knew better than to ignore a call from Arthur Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," Marcus answered on the second ring. His voice was professional, devoid of sleepiness. "Did you receive the package?" "I did," Arthur said. His voice was steady, though his hand gripped the phone tightly. "Thank you, Marcus. But I need more." "More photos?" Marcus asked. "I can follow them again tomorrow. There's a routine forming." "No," Arthur said. He looked at the fire. "I don't want to trap them. I don't want to catch them in a compromising position. I have enough of that." He paused, searching for the words to explain the hollow feeling in his chest. "I need to know the nature of it. Is it love, or is it just escape? I need to know what she finds with him that she doesn't find here." There was a silence on the other end. Investigators were used to digging up dirt, not analyzing emotions. "That's unconventional, sir. Usually clients want leverage." "I don't want leverage," Arthur replied firmly. "I want clarity. I want to know if there's anything left to save. Can you access communications, emails, messages, not to publish them? Just for me. I need to read her words. I need to know what she says when she thinks no one is listening." "I can arrange that," Marcus said slowly. "It will take a few days. Digital forensics isn't instant." "Take your time," Arthur said. "But be discreet. If she finds out you're digging this deep, she'll shut down. I don't want her to feel hunted. I want her to feel seen." Eventually. Understood, sir. I'll update you on Friday. Arthur hung up. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. He had made his decision. He would not act on impulse. He would not let the rage dictate his moves. This was not a business acquisition. This was the dissolution of a life. It required precision, not force. He stood up and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean, glittering under the streetlights. He wondered if Elena was looking at the same view from the guest room window. He wondered if she felt alone too. The next few days were exercise in restraint. Arthur maintained his routine. He went to the office, he came home, he ate dinner with Elena. But the dynamic had shifted. He watched her with a new intensity, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. He listened to the way she spoke about her day. He noticed the way she hesitated before answering simple questions. He was gathering data, just as Marcus was, but from the source. On Wednesday, they were having dinner in the formal dining room. The silence was usual, but tonight Arthur broke it. Julian mentioned a project he's working on. Arthur said casually, cutting his steak. He didn't look up. Something in renewable energy. Did he mention it to you? Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flickered to his, then away. Julian, when did you speak to Julian? Monday. Arthur lied smoothly. At the club. He seemed excited. Oh, Elena said, placing her fork down. She picked up her wine glass, her fingers trembling slightly. I haven't spoken to him in a while. Not about work. Really, Arthur said. He finally looked at her. His gaze was calm, devoid of accusation. That's strange. He said you were consulting for him. On the side. Elena's face went pale. She knew he was testing her. She could lie again. She could say she misunderstood. But the look in Arthur's eyes wasn't angry. It was sad. It was the look of a man who already knew the answer and was waiting for her to admit it. The pressure of the double life was becoming too heavy. The lies were stacking up, creating a wall between them that was impossible to climb. I might have mentioned some ideas, she stammered. Nothing formal. Just advice. Advice, Arthur repeated. He took a sip of wine. You always were good at seeing the big picture. Better than me sometimes. Elena looked down at her plate. Arthur, why are you asking this? Because I'm trying to understand, he said. He put his knife and fork down. The clink was soft in the large room. I feel like there are parts of your life I don't know about. And I'm not angry, Elena. I'm just confused. I want to know who you are now. Because I feel like I lost the woman I married. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away quickly. You didn't lose me, Arthur. I'm right here. Are you? He asked softly. Because the woman I married didn't need to lie about having coffee with an old friend. She didn't need to hide her phone. She didn't need to sleep in a different room. The air left the room. Elena stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I can't do this tonight. I'm not feeling well. Sit down, Elena, Arthur said. His voice was gentle but firm. It wasn't a command, it was a request. Please. Just for 5 minutes. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to punish you. I just want to know if there's still in us. Elena hesitated. She looked at the door, then back at him. She saw the exhaustion in his face, the lack of malice. Slowly, she sat back down. She wrapped her arms around herself as if cold. There is an us, she whispered. But it's broken. And I don't know how to fix it. Every time I try to talk to you, you talk about work. Every time I try to reach out, you're distracted. Julian, he just listens. He doesn't try to fix me. He just lets me be. Arthur nodded slowly. He absorbed the words. They hurt, but they were the clarity he had asked for. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't about lust. It was about being heard. I see, he said. So it's emotional. It's everything, Elena said, a tear finally escaping. I feel lonely, Arthur. I feel lonely in this huge house with you. That's the truth. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Arthur reached across the table. He didn't touch her, but he placed his hand palm up, an invitation. Thank you for telling me the truth, he said. That's all I wanted. Elena looked at his hand, then at his face. She didn't take it. She stood up again. I need to go. I can't be here right now. Go, Arthur said. Rest. She left the room. Arthur sat alone at the long table. He hadn't won. He hadn't gotten an apology that fixed everything. But he had the truth. She wasn't leaving him for Julian's money. She was leaving him for Julian's attention. That was something he could understand. That was something he could work with, if she was willing. But he knew the trust was fractured. The next day, Friday, Marcus called. The report is ready, Mr. Sterling. I've sent it to your secure server. There's a lot of correspondence. It's extensive. Send it, Arthur said. He was in his study, the door locked. He opened his laptop and accessed the file. He read the emails between Elena and Julian. They weren't explicit. They were intimate. They talked about fears, about dreams, about the suffocating weight of the Sterling name. Julian encouraged her art. Julian asked about her feelings. Arthur read words from his wife that he hadn't heard in years. I feel alive when I'm with you. I wish I could stop time. Arthur closed the laptop. He didn't feel rage. He felt a deep, resonating grief. He had built a prison of gold, and she had found a key in another man's kindness. He stood up and walked to the window. The city was busy below. People rushing, living, loving, fighting. He had isolated himself from all of it to protect his empire, and in doing so, he had lost the one thing that made the empire worth having. He realized then that vengeance would be pointless. Suing Julian would prove Elena's choice wrong. Divorcing her would prove her loneliness right. He needed to do something unexpected. He needed to break the pattern. He needed to show her that he could change, not because he was forced to, but because he chose to. But he also needed to protect himself. He couldn't live in limbo. He picked up the phone again. Marcus, he said. Stop the surveillance. All of it. Sir Marcus asked. Are you sure we have enough for a full case? I'm sure, Arthur said. I don't need a case. I need a solution. Delete the files from your server. Keep only the copy I have. And bill me double for the discretion. Understood, sir. Arthur hung up. He looked at the laptop. He could destroy them with this data. He could leak it. He could ruin Julian's reputation. But if he did that, Elena would never forgive him. She would see him as the tyrant she feared. If he wanted any chance of redemption, or even a dignified end, he had to hold the power without using it. He had to be the bigger man. He walked out of the study. He went to the guest room door. He knocked softly. There was no answer. He opened the door. The room was empty. Her suitcase was gone. A note lay on the bed. Arthur, I can't stay here knowing you know. I need space to think. I'll stay at the penthouse downtown. Please don't follow me. I need to figure out who I am without the lies. Elena. Arthur picked up the note. He read it twice. She had left. Not with Julian, but alone. That was a good sign. It meant she was taking responsibility. He folded the note and put it in his pocket. He walked back to his study and sat down. The house was silent again. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy with secrets. It was heavy with possibility. He had the truth. He had the clarity. Now he had to decide what to do with the rest of his life. He looked at the photo of them on his desk from years ago, when they were young and happy. He touched the glass. I'm listening now, he whispered to the empty room. I'm finally listening. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floor. But Arthur didn't turn on the lights. He sat in the dimness, ready for whatever came next, knowing that the real battle wasn't against Julian, but against the years of neglect that had built the wall between them. He would not tear the wall down with explosives. He would dismantle it, brick by brick, with patience. And if it couldn't be dismantled, he would walk away with his dignity intact. That manageable an hour ago was now suffocating. The promise he had made to himself, to dismantle the wall brick by brick, felt impossible when the wall was made of ghosts. He needed to know. Not because he wanted to catch her, but because he needed to see if the woman who left was still the woman he loved, or if she was someone else entirely. He stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, a harsh sound in the quiet room. He picked up his keys. He knew he was violating her request. He knew it was wrong. But the need for closure, for a final concrete truth, outweighed the respect for her boundaries. He told himself it was for the best. He told himself he would just look. He would not interfere. The drive to the city was a blur of red taillights and streetlights reflecting on the wet asphalt. The rain had started again, a gentle drizzle that smeared the windshield. Arthur kept the wipers on a slow setting, the rhythmic swish matching the beating of his heart. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't reckless. He was a man moving toward a verdict. The penthouse was a property they owned in the downtown district, used rarely for visits to the opera or gallery openings. It was neutral ground, or so she thought. He parked in the underground garage, the engine ticking as it cooled. He took the private elevator up, the numbers. Climbing slowly. 20, 30, 40. The penthouse floor. The doors opened with a soft chime. The hallway was carpeted, muffling his footsteps. He stood before the door of Unit 4002. He had the key card in his pocket. He hesitated. His hand hovered over the lock. If he opened this door, there was no going back. If he saw nothing, he could pretend. If he saw something, he would have to act. He slid the card. The light turned green. The lock clicked. He pushed the door open slowly. The apartment was dark, save for the light spilling in from the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room. The air inside was still, smelling of the lemon polish the cleaning staff used, but underneath that, there was something else. A scent. Cologne. It wasn't his. It was lighter, spicier. Julian's. Arthur closed the door softly behind him. He didn't turn on the lights. He walked across the marble foyer, his shoes silent on the rug. He could hear voices. They were coming from the terrace. The glass doors were slightly ajar, the curtains billowing inward with the breeze. Arthur stopped in the shadow of the hallway. He didn't move closer. He just listened. "I can't keep doing this, Julian," Elena's voice drifted in. It was tired, strained. "He knows. I can feel it. The way he looks at me. It's like he's mourning me while I'm still standing there." "Then leave," Julian said. His voice was low, steady. "You don't owe him your happiness, Elena. You've given him 20 years. You've given him your youth. What do you have left to give?" "I have a life," she whispered. "A life we built. It's not just a contract. It's everything I know. If I walk away, I lose everything. The foundation, the friends, the identity." "You have an identity," Julian insisted. There was a sound of movement, fabric rustling. "You are an artist. You are a woman. You are not just a sterling. Come away with me. Just for a weekend. Let him see that you are serious. Let him see that you are gone." Arthur's hand gripped the doorframe. His knuckles turned white. This wasn't just emotional anymore. This was planning. This was exit strategy. He stepped forward, just enough to see through the gap in the curtains. They were standing by the railing, looking out at the city. Julian was close to her. Too close. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered on her cheek. Elena didn't pull away. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing for a moment. It was a gesture of intimacy that belonged to a husband. It was a gesture Arthur hadn't offered in years. Then Julian leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a passionate, frantic kiss. It was slow, tender, confirmed. It was the kiss of people who had already crossed the line long ago. Arthur felt the air leave his lungs. It wasn't a shock. He had expected it. He had known it. But seeing it, witnessing the physical reality of his replacement, was a physical blow. It felt like a hand squeezing his heart. He didn't make a sound. He didn't burst out. He didn't shout. He just watched. He watched the woman he had vowed to protect finding comfort in the arms of his friend. He watched the tenderness that should have been theirs being shared with someone else. The pain was sharp, but it was quickly followed by a cold numbness. This was the concrete evidence. Not photos, not emails, but the reality of her leaning into another man's touch. He stepped back into the shadows. He couldn't watch anymore. He turned and walked back through the apartment. He moved quietly, like a ghost haunting his own life. He reached the front door. He paused. He could go out there. He could confront them. He could demand they stop. But what would that achieve? It would turn them into martyrs. It would turn him into the villain. He opened the door and slipped out into the hallway. He closed it softly, leaving them in their illusion of privacy. The elevator ride down was the longest of his life. He stared at his reflection in the polished steel doors. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper. The color had drained from his face. When the doors opened at the garage, he walked to his car but didn't get in immediately. He leaned against the cold metal of the driver's side door. The concrete walls of the garage echoed with the drip of water. He closed his eyes. He thought about the kiss. He thought about the way she had leaned into it. She wasn't being coerced. She wasn't being tricked. She was choosing. She was choosing the warmth over the cold. She was choosing the man who listened over the man who provided. He got into the car and sat there for a long time. The engine was off. The silence was absolute. He thought about the title people gave him. The billionaire. The titan. It meant nothing here. Money couldn't buy loyalty. Money couldn't buy affection. Money couldn't stop a heart from wandering. He started the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness of the garage. He drove out into the night, the city lights blurring through the rain on the windshield. He didn't go home immediately. He drove along the river, watching the water flow dark and fast. He needed to process this. He needed to decide what kind of man he would be in the morning. The temptation for vengeance was there. It whispered to him. He could expose Julian. He could cut him off from every contract, every deal, every opportunity in the city. He could make sure Elena never saw him again. He could use the law, the money, the influence. It would be easy. It would be satisfying. But as he drove, he thought about Elena's voice. He's mourning me while I'm still standing there. She felt dead in his marriage. If he destroyed her now, he would be killing her completely. He would be proving her right. He would be the cage she needed to escape. He turned the car around. He headed back to the mansion. The gates opened automatically, sensing the transponder. The house loomed ahead, dark and silent. He parked in the driveway. He didn't go inside. He sat in the car, looking at the front door. He had the evidence. He had the truth. He had the pain. Now he had the choice. He could burn it all down, or he could do something no one expected. He could do something that would leave them speechless. He looked at his hands on the steering wheel. They were steady. The numbness was fading, replaced by a cold clarity. He wouldn't fight them. He wouldn't beg. He would rise above it. He would show them that dignity was worth more than revenge. He got out of the car and walked to the door. The rain had stopped. The air was cool. He unlocked the door and stepped into the foyer. The house was empty. The note was still on the desk in the study. He walked past it. He didn't pick it up. He went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. He drank it slowly. He thought about the meeting he would call, the announcement he would make. He thought about the look on their faces when he didn't react the way they expected. He thought about the silence that would follow. It would be louder than any scream. He set the glass down. He walked to the living room and sat on the sofa. He waited for the sun to rise. He waited for the next chapter to begin. He knew what he had to do. He knew the cost. But he also knew the reward. Peace. Integrity. Freedom. He closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he slept. Not a restless sleep, but a deep, dreamless rest. He was ready. The discovery was complete. The pain was acknowledged. Now the action would begin. And it would be unlike anything they had ever seen. The moment, lying there on the sofa, he forgot. Then the memory crashed back into him with the weight of a collapsing building. The kiss. The touch. The betrayal. He sat up slowly, rubbing his face with hands that felt heavy, as if made of lead. The house was silent, but the silence was different today. It wasn't the silence of absence. It was the silence of anticipation. The calm before the storm he was about to unleash, or perhaps the storm he was about to prevent. He stood up and walked to the window. The city below was waking up. Cars moved along the highways, people rushed to trains. Life continued in its relentless, uncaring rhythm. He was a billionaire, a man who could influence the stock market with a tweet, yet he couldn't control the beating of his own wife's heart. The injustice of it burned in his chest, a hot coal that refused to cool. He walked to the study, his footsteps echoing on the marble. The note Elena had left was still on the desk, next to the envelope of photographs. He looked at them. He didn't need to open the envelope again. The images were burned into his retina. Julian's hand on her cheek. The way she leaned into him. Arthur poured himself a drink, though it was only 8 in the morning. The amber liquid swirled in the glass. He thought about the power he held. He could pick up the phone right now. He could call his head of legal. Within an hour, Julian's company would be under audit. Within a day, his assets would be frozen. Within a week, the story would be in every tabloid. Billionaire's wife cheats with close friend. It would be a scandal that would follow them for the rest of their lives. He could destroy them. He could make sure they never found work, never found peace, never found comfort. The thought was seductive. It offered a release for the pain, a way to transfer the hurt from himself to them. He lifted the glass to his lips, then stopped. If he did that, what would he become? A tyrant, a vindictive old man using money as a weapon? He looked at his reflection in the dark screen of his computer monitor. He saw the lines of fatigue, the gray in his beard. He didn't want to be that man. He had built an empire on integrity, on deals kept, on handshakes that mattered. If he broke his own code now, in the face of personal pain, then the empire meant nothing. The money was just paper. The reputation was the only thing that was real. But reputation wasn't just about what people thought. It was about who you were when no one was watching. And right now, no one was watching. It was just him and the choice. His phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up. Elena. He stared at the name. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He let it ring twice before he answered. He needed to control his breathing. He needed to sound like the Arthur Sterling the world knew. Calm. Unshakable. Arthur, her voice was small, tentative. She was expecting anger. She was preparing for a fight. Elena, he said. His voice was steady, surprisingly so. Where are you? I'm at the penthouse, she said. A pause. I didn't know if I should come home. This is still your home, Elena, Arthur replied. He walked to the window again, looking out at the horizon. Unless you decide it isn't. I don't know what I want, she confessed. He could hear the tremor in her voice. After last night. I know you know. I saw you, Arthur. In the hallway. I saw the shadow. Arthur closed his eyes. She had seen him. The realization sent a jolt through him. She knew he had witnessed the kiss. She knew he had walked away. Yes, he said simply. I saw. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. The question was filled with confusion, perhaps even fear. Why didn't you come out? Because I didn't want to make a scene, Arthur said. He opened his eyes. The view was sharp, clear. I didn't want to hurt you. Not in that moment. There was a long silence on the other end. He could imagine her sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the phone tight. You should have, she whispered. You should have yelled. You should have been angry. It would be easier if you were angry. Would it? Arthur asked. Anger is easy, Elena. Forgiveness is hard. Indifference is harder. I'm not ready to be indifferent yet. What does that mean? She asked. It means I need time to think, Arthur said. And so do you. Come home when you are ready. Not because I told you to, but because you want to. We need to talk. Properly. Arthur, She stopped. He heard her take a breath. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to understand. But I am sorry. I know, he said. Come home, Elena. He hung up before she could answer. He set the phone down gently. His hand was shaking slightly. He clenched it into a fist until the tremor stopped. That conversation had cost him more than any business negotiation ever had. Every word was an effort of will. He wanted to scream. He wanted to ask her why Julian was better than him. He wanted to demand to know what was wrong with him. But he had held the line. He had maintained his dignity. He walked around the desk and sat in his chair. He opened the top drawer and took out a notepad. He needed to plan. If he was going to do this, if he was going to choose the path of dignity over vengeance, he needed to structure it. He couldn't just let it slide. That would be weakness. He needed to make a statement that would leave them speechless. A statement that would redefine the end of their marriage, if that was what it came to. He began to write. The gala. It was scheduled for next week. The biggest event of the year. Hundreds of guests. The press. The business partners. The family. It was the perfect stage. But what would he say? He couldn't announce the infidelity. That would be cruel. That would be the vengeance he was trying to avoid. He needed to announce something else. Something about freedom. Something about truth. He wrote down keywords. Honesty. Integrity. Release. He looked at the words. They felt abstract. He needed concrete action. He thought about the assets. The prenup. He could leave her with nothing. Legally, he was protected. She had signed away her claim to the bulk of the fortune in case of infidelity. He could enforce it. He could leave her with nothing but the clothes on her back. It would be justice. It would be protection. But was it justice or was it punishment if he stripped her of everything? She would be forced to stay with Julian out of necessity, or she would resent him forever. If he gave her freedom, truly free her, then she would have to choose her own path without the safety net of his money or the constraint of his anger. He picked up the pen again. Full settlement. The words looked insane on the paper. Why would he give her more than she was entitled to because he wasn't doing this for her? He was doing it for himself. He wanted to walk away from this knowing he had done the right thing. He wanted to look in the mirror and see a man who loved enough to let go, rather than a man who owned enough to control. The door to the study opened. His housekeeper, Maria, stood there. She had worked for them for 15 years. She knew the rhythms of the house better than anyone. She saw the glass of whiskey on the desk. She saw the photos spread out. She saw the look in his eyes. Sir, she said softly, breakfast is ready. Would you like me to set a place for Mrs. Sterling? Arthur looked at her. She was waiting, her hands clasped in front of her apron. She knew. Everyone in the house knew something was wrong. The tension was palpable. No, Maria, Arthur said. Just one place. For now. Is everything all right, Mr. Sterling? She asked. It was bold of her to ask, but her voice was filled with genuine concern. She had seen him grow from an ambitious young man to this tired billionaire. She cared about him. Arthur looked at the photos again. He covered them with the notepad. No, Maria, he said honestly. Everything is not all right. But it will be. Can I get you anything, she asked. Yes, Arthur said. He looked up at her. Can you tell the staff? Tell them to be kind. There might be difficult days ahead. But I want this house to remain a place of peace. No gossip. No taking sides. Just professionalism. Maria nodded slowly. Of course, sir. We are here for you. Thank you, Arthur said. He meant it. In a world of yes-men and sycophants, her genuine concern was a rare commodity. She closed the door. Arthur was alone again. The turmoil inside him hadn't vanished. It was still there, churning like a dark sea. But he had built a levee. He had channeled the rage into a plan. He wouldn't let the flood destroy everything. He would control the flow. He thought about Julian. He wondered if Julian was sleeping well. He wondered if Julian knew what kind of man he had crossed. Not a man of violence, but a man of principle. And a man of principle, when pushed, was far more dangerous than a man of anger. Anger burns out. Principle lasts. He stood up and walked to the bookshelf. He ran his fingers along the spines of the leather-bound books. They were filled with knowledge, with history, with the stories of men who had come before him. He pulled out a biography of Lincoln, a man who had faced betrayal, loss, and immense pressure. He opened the book randomly. Always bear in mind that your own resolution to succeed is more important than any one thing. He closed the book. His resolution was set. He would not succeed by destroying them. He would succeed by surviving them with his soul intact. He walked back to the desk and picked up the phone. He dialed his personal lawyer. David, Arthur said when the line connected. I need you to draft an agreement. A settlement agreement. For the divorce, David asked. He didn't sound surprised. Lawyers heard everything. Do you want the standard prenup enforcement? No, Arthur said. He looked out the window again. The sun was higher now. The light was brighter. I want something else. I want her to be secure. Regardless of what happens. Make it generous. More than generous. Arthur, David said, his voice sharp with concern. Are you sure, given the circumstances? We have leverage. We don't need to give her anything beyond the legal minimum. I'm sure, Arthur said. Do it, David. And keep it confidential. No one knows about this until I say so. Understood, David said slowly. I'll start drafting. Arthur hung up. The first step was taken. The trap was set, but it wasn't a trap for them. It was a trap for his own ego. He was forcing himself to be better than his pain. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He sat back in the chair and exhaled. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. He was no longer reacting. He was acting. The turmoil was still there, but it was no longer controlling him. He was steering the ship through the storm. And he knew exactly where he was going. He was going to the gala. He was going to speak. And he was going to leave everyone speechless. The thought brought a small, grim smile to his face. Not a smile of joy, but a smile of resolve. The world expected a scandal. He would give them a lesson. The pain was real. The loss was real. But the man behind the money was still standing. And he was ready to show them what true wealth looked like. It wasn't in the bank accounts. It was in the choices you made when you had everything to liquidity on the penthouse and the trust fund. Do you understand what you're giving up? It's hundreds of millions. And after what she did, I understand the numbers, David, Arthur replied. His voice was low, but it carried a weight that silenced the lawyer's protest. I'm not paying her for loyalty. I'm paying her for the years. And I'm paying for my own peace. Peace, David scoffed lightly. Arthur, the market is already smelling blood. The rumors are leaking. Julian's company's stock dipped this morning. People are talking. If you go soft now, they'll think you're weak. They'll think you're being manipulated. You need to show strength. You need to litigate. You need to make an example of them. Arthur stood up and walked to the window. Below the gates of the estate, he could see them. Even from this distance, the flashes were visible. Paparazzi. They had found out. Somehow, the scent of scandal had traveled faster than the truth. Black SUVs were parked along the curb, lenses pointed up at the house like cannons. Let them talk, David. My strength isn't in how hard I can hit. It's in how I stand when I've been hit. This isn't a philosophy seminar, David snapped, the frustration evident. This is business. This is reputation. If you let them walk away unscathed, you invite disrespect. Julian betrayed you. He used your trust to get close to your wife. You destroy him, or you look like a fool. Arthur gripped the phone tighter. The knuckles turned white. The pressure was mounting. It wasn't just his lawyer. It was the entire ecosystem he lived in. They all believed in the same rule, an eye for an eye. A betrayal met with destruction. To do otherwise was seen as weakness, a crack in the armor of the billionaire persona. I'm not trying to look strong for them, David. I'm trying to remain human for myself. Finish the draft. Generous terms. Confidential until the gala. The gala, David repeated, skepticism dripping from the words. You're still going after this. It's a trap, Arthur. The press will be there. They'll be waiting for a reaction. They want a scene. Then I'll give them one, Arthur said. Just not the one they expect. He hung up before David could argue further. He placed the receiver back on the cradle, but the silence didn't return. The phone rang again immediately. This time it was Richard, his oldest business partner. Arthur sighed and answered. Artie, Richard said, using the old nickname. His tone was conspiratorial, heavy with masculine solidarity. I heard. I'm sorry, man. Truly. But listen, I've made some calls. We can freeze Julian's assets. We can pull the financing on his new project. He'll be bankrupt in a month. You give the word, and I'll make sure he never works in this city again. Arthur closed his eyes. He could see Richard in his mind, sitting in his leather chair, cigar in hand, ready to wage war on his behalf. It was what he was supposed to want. It was what any man in his position was supposed to do. Protect the territory. Punish the intruder. No, Richard. No, Richard sounded incredulous. Did you hear me? We can crush him. He betrayed you. He betrayed the partnership. He did, Arthur agreed. But if I crush him, I become the villain in the story. I become the angry husband with the checkbook. I don't want that legacy, Richard. I don't want my name associated with vengeance. Then what do you want? Richard asked, his voice rising. You want to be the martyr. You want to let them laugh at you, because they will laugh. Arthur, the world doesn't respect kindness in this game. They respect power. Then I'll show them a different kind of power, Arthur said. He looked out the window again. The cameras were flashing more rapidly now. A helicopter hovered overhead, the thump, thump, thump vibrating through the glass. It felt like a siege. They were waiting for him to emerge. They were waiting for the rage. They wanted the shouting, the slammed doors, the security guards dragging someone away. They wanted the drama that sold newspapers. You're making a mistake, Richard warned. When you're ready to be sensible, call me. Until then, don't sign anything. I won't, Arthur said. He ended the call. He turned off the ringer on the phone. The silence that followed was artificial, broken by the distant sound of the helicopter and the muffled shouts from the gate. He felt trapped. Not by Elena, not by Julian, but by the expectations of everyone around him. They had built him up as a titan, and now they demanded he act like one. They wanted blood. He walked out of the study and down the hallway. The house felt different today. The staff moved quietly, eyes averted, whispering when they thought he wasn't looking. He was the subject of their pity now. The billionaire who couldn't keep his wife. The fool who was being cheated on. He could feel their gaze on his back. It burned. He went to the master bedroom. It was empty, cold. Elena's side of the closet was half empty. The space where her dresses used to hang looked like missing teeth. He ran his hand over the empty rail. He thought about the gala. It was 2 days away. The biggest social event of the year. Every major player in the city would be there. And Elena would be there. Julian would be there. The press would be there. It was the perfect arena for a public execution of reputations. Everyone expected him to use the microphone to humiliate them. To announce the divorce, to name the affair, to strip them of their social standing in front of God and everyone. He walked to the mirror. He looked at the man staring back. The suit he wore was expensive, tailored to perfection, but it felt like a costume. He unbuttoned the collar. He needed to breathe. He thought about the speech he was writing. He thought about the words. Freedom. Truth. Dignity. They sounded noble on paper, but would they sound weak in the room? Would the audience laugh? Would they whisper that he had lost his edge? His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message. From Elena. The cameras are outside my building too. They know. Arthur. What are you going to do? He stared at the screen. She was scared. Not of him, but of the world. She knew what the world expected him to do. She knew she was the prey in this narrative. He typed back. Nothing they expect. Stay inside. I will handle it. He put the phone away. He walked to the window of the bedroom. The view was different from here. He could see the edge of the property where the press was gathered. They looked like ants swarming around the perimeter. He felt a surge of anger, not at Elena, but at them. At the vultures waiting for him to fail. They wanted the crash. They wanted the downfall. It sold stories. It validated their cynicism. If he acted with grace, he would confuse them. And confusion was better than satisfaction. He went back to the study. He sat at the desk and pulled the speech draft toward him. He picked up the pen. He crossed out a line. I was wronged. He replaced it with we were lost. He crossed out betrayal. He replaced it with truth. He was rewriting the narrative. He was taking the weapon out of the hands of the public. If he refused to fight, there was no war. If he refused to be a victim, there was no tragedy. The doorbell rang. It was a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the house. Arthur didn't move. The staff would answer it, but he knew who it was. More partners. More friends coming to offer condolences and advice on how to destroy his enemies. He stood up and locked the study door. He needed isolation. He needed to fortify himself against the pressure. He poured another glass of water. His hands were steady now. The tremor was gone. The decision had solidified into resolve. He knew what they wanted. They wanted the old Arthur. The shark. The man who took no prisoners. But that man was tired. That man was lonely. That man was the reason Elena had walked away in the first place. If he wanted to win, he couldn't win the way they thought. He had to change the game. He looked at the calendar on the wall. 2 days. 48 hours until the gala. 48 hours of this pressure. The phones would keep ringing. The press would keep camping. The rumors would get worse. They would say he was weak. They would say he was being controlled. They would say he was losing his mind. Let them. He would let the noise build. He would let the tension rise to a breaking point. And then, on that stage, under those lights, he would release it all in a way that would silence the room. He sat down and began to write again. The pen scratched against the paper. He wrote about love, not as possession, but as freedom. He wrote about marriage, not as a contract, but as a choice. He wrote about failure, not as something to be punished, but as something to be learned from. It was dangerous. It was vulnerable. It was everything his world told him not to be. A knock on the door. Maria again. Mr. Sterling, dinner is served. And, there is a man here. From the press. He says he has a statement he wants you to confirm. Arthur didn't look up from the paper. Tell him I have. No statement. Tell him I'll see them all at the gala. He says he'll wait, Maria said. Let him wait, Arthur said. Let them all wait. Maria hesitated. Are you sure, sir, they are getting aggressive? I'm sure, Arthur said. He finally looked up. His eyes were dark, determined. No interviews. No comments. No leaks. The only thing they get is what I give them on that stage. Maria nodded. Very good, sir. She closed the door. Arthur was alone again. The house was dark now, the sun having set while he wrote. The lights of the press camp outside were brighter, cutting through the night. They were hungry. They were waiting for the kill. But Arthur Sterling was not going to feed them. He was going to starve the beast. He looked at the speech one last time. It was finished. It was ready. He felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. The pressure was still there, the weight of the world expecting him to break, but he had found a center of gravity that they couldn't touch. He stood up and turned off the desk lamp. The room plunged into darkness, save for the glow of the city outside. He walked out of the study, ready to face the night, ready to face the morning, ready to face the gala. The pressure was immense, but so was the resolve. Tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. The press was still there. He could see the glow of their cigarette embers in the darkness beyond the gates, like fireflies waiting for dawn. They expected a war. They expected blood. They had no idea that the battle had already been fought and settled in the quiet of this room. At 2 a.m, the doorbell rang. It was a soft chime, but it echoed through the empty house. Arthur stood up and walked to the door himself. He didn't want the staff to see who was coming. He opened the door to find David standing there, holding a briefcase, looking disheveled and tired. The lawyer stepped inside, shaking the rain from his umbrella. You're insane, Arthur, David said, though there was no heat in it, only exhaustion. He walked into the study and placed the briefcase on the desk. Do you know what time it is? Do you know what I'm risking by being here? I know, Arthur said. He closed the study door. And I appreciate it. Sit down. David sat, loosening his tie. He opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. The settlement agreement. As per your instructions. Full liquidity on the penthouse. The trust fund remains intact. No infidelity clause enforcement. And a separate confidentiality clause for the press. He looked up at Arthur, his eyes searching. Once you sign this, there is no going back. You are giving her the keys to the kingdom, Arthur. And you are giving Julian a free pass. Arthur picked up the pen. It felt heavy in his hand. He looked at the signature line. I'm not giving them a pass, David. I'm giving myself freedom. If I bind them with legal chains, I am bound to them forever. Every lawsuit, every clause, every court date keeps me tied to this pain. I want to cut the cord. Completely. It looks like weakness, David warned. The board will talk. The shareholders will talk. Let them, Arthur said. He signed the document. The ink flowed smoothly, a dark river on the white paper. My company is built on performance, not my marriage. They will adjust. And if they don't, I'll step down. I'm tired, David. I'm tired of fighting for things that don't matter. David watched him sign. He didn't say anything else. He just packed the papers back into the briefcase. I'll file this tomorrow, after the gala. Until then, it stays between us. Thank you, Arthur said. He walked David to the door. When he returned to the study, he felt lighter, but also more exposed. The safety net was gone. There was no plan B. There was only the speech and the truth. He sat back down and picked up the index cards where he had written his notes for the gala. He read them over again. Gratitude. Legacy. Release. They were simple words, but they carried the weight of his life. He practiced the opening line in the mirror. Thank you for coming. Too generic. Welcome. Too cold. He tried again. I am honored to stand before you. Better. He needed to sound like himself, but a version of himself that was stripped bare. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was Elena. He stared at the screen. It was 3 a.m. She wouldn't call unless she was desperate. He answered. Arthur, her voice was a whisper. She sounded like she had been crying. The rumors. They're saying you're going to announce the divorce tomorrow. They're saying you're going to sue Julian. Let them say what they want, Arthur replied. His voice was calm, a stark contrast to her panic. Are you? She asked. The fear was palpable. She was afraid of his power. She was afraid of what the billionaire husband could do to the small man she had chosen. Arthur, please. Don't destroy him. Don't destroy me. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve protection. But please. Arthur closed his eyes. He could hear the tremor in her voice. It wasn't the voice of a woman trying to manipulate him. It was the voice of a woman who knew she had made a mistake and was waiting for the hammer to fall. Elena, he said softly. Go to sleep. Tomorrow, just come to the gala. Wear the blue dress. The one you wore when we first met. There was a silence on the other end. Confusion. The blue dress, Arthur. What are you doing? Trust me, he said. Just once more. Trust me. I don't know if I can, she whispered. You don't have to, Arthur replied. Just be there. He hung up. He placed the phone face down. The conversation left him drained. He was protecting the woman who had broken his heart. He was protecting the man who had betrayed his friendship. It went against every instinct of self-preservation. But he remembered the feeling of the rain on his face in the park. He remembered the feeling of the cold marble floor. He wanted to feel warm again. And warmth didn't come from vengeance. Morning came gray and quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean. Arthur stood in front of the mirror in his dressing room. The suit was black, tailored to perfection. He adjusted the cufflinks, silver and understated. He looked at his reflection. He looked tired, but there was a clarity in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He wasn't the victim anymore. He was the author of the next chapter. His assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door. The car is ready, Mr. Sterling. The security team is in position. The press is aggressive. Let them be, Arthur said. He picked up the envelope containing the settlement documents. He slipped it into his inner jacket pocket. It felt heavy against his chest. Are the arrangements made? Yes, sir, Sarah said. The private room at the venue is prepared. No one will disturb you until you are ready to go on stage. Good, Arthur said. He walked past her. Sarah, yes, sir, thank you, he said. For your discretion. And your loyalty. Sarah smiled, a genuine warm smile. Good luck, Mr. Sterling. The drive to the Grand Hotel was silent. The city was waking up. People walked on the sidewalks, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the back of the armored sedan. Arthur watched them. Ordinary lives. Ordinary problems. He envied them. He envied the ability to fail without the world watching. The car pulled up to the entrance of the hotel. The flashbulbs erupted instantly. It was like lightning striking the pavement. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Sterling, is it true? Are you filing for divorce? What about Julian Vance? Look here. Arthur. Arthur didn't look. He kept his face neutral, a mask of polite indifference. The security team formed a wall around him, guiding him through the crowd. He could hear the cameras clicking, a mechanical rain that never stopped. He walked into the lobby, the noise muffling as the doors closed behind him. The air inside was cool, scented with lilies. The gala was being held in the grand ballroom. He could hear the murmur of hundreds of voices inside. He stopped in the antechamber. Sarah handed him a glass of water. 5 minutes, sir. Arthur nodded. He took a sip. His hands were steady. He thought about Elena. She would be inside. She would be terrified. She would be expecting the execution. He thought about Julian. He would be there too, probably hiding in the corner, waiting for the blow. Arthur touched the pocket where the documents lay. He wasn't going to hand them out publicly. That would be humiliation. He would hand them to Elena privately after the speech. The speech was for the world. The documents were for her. Sir, Sarah said. It's time. Arthur took a deep breath. He adjusted his tie. He thought about the man he was 10 years ago. He would have burned the building down. He thought about the man he was yesterday. He would have sued them into oblivion. But the man standing here now was different. He was tired of the fire. He wanted water. He wanted to put out the flames. He walked toward the stage doors. The music inside was swelling, orchestra tuning up. The sound of the host announcing his name grew louder. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host, Arthur Sterling. The applause began. It was polite, expectant. They were waiting for the show. They were waiting for the scandal. Arthur stepped into the wings. The light from the stage was blinding. He could see the sea of faces. The elite of the city. The judges. The partners. And there, in the third row, he saw Elena. She was wearing the blue dress. She looked pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wasn't looking at the stage. She was looking at her hands. Julian was not near her. He was somewhere in the back, hidden. Arthur stepped into the light. The applause grew louder. He walked to the podium. He placed his hands on the sides. He looked out at the crowd. He saw the cameras in the back, recording every blink. He saw the lawyers in the front row, ready to analyze every word. He saw Elena, finally looking up at him, her eyes wide with fear. He leaned into the microphone. The feedback hummed slightly, then settled. The room went silent. Hundreds of people holding their breath. The air was thick with anticipation. This was the moment. The planning was over. The secret was about to become public. He looked at Elena one last time. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Then he began to speak. Thank you, he said. His voice was clear, resonating through the hall. It is an honor to stand before you tonight. He paused. He let the silence hang. He wanted them to feel the weight of what was coming. He wanted them to feel the shift in the atmosphere. He was not going to give them the story they wanted. He was going to give them the story they needed. He took another breath. The envelope in his pocket felt like it was burning. But he was ready. The plan was set. The surprise was loaded. And now he would pull the trigger. Not with a gun, but with words. The suspense in the room was palpable, a physical thing. The hundreds of guests. Arthur stood behind the podium, the cool wood beneath his palms grounding him. The microphone was a black eye staring back at him, waiting to transmit his voice to every corner of the room, and beyond, to the world outside where the cameras still waited. He could feel the expectation radiating from the crowd like heat. They were leaning forward in their chairs, their eyes wide, their breaths held. They were vultures waiting for the carcass to be exposed. They wanted the names. They wanted the details. They wanted the humiliation. Arthur looked out at the sea of faces. He saw Richard, his business partner, sitting in the front row, his jaw set, ready to nod in approval when the axe fell. He saw the society matrons, their pearls gleaming, their notebooks ready to record the scandal of the century. And he saw Elena. She was sitting exactly where he had asked, in the blue dress. She looked fragile, like a bird that had forgotten how to fly. Her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the tablecloth, her shoulders hunched as if protecting herself from a blow. She expected him to destroy her. She expected him to use this platform to strip her of her dignity, to confirm every rumor, to make her the villain of the story so he could remain the hero. Arthur took a breath. The air smelled of expensive perfume and polished wood. He began to speak, his voice low but carrying clearly through the speakers. We live in a world that values success above all else, he said. The words hung in the air. We measure our lives in acquisitions, in stock prices, in the size of our homes and the reach of our influence. He paused, letting the words settle. A few people nodded. This was standard fare for a sterling gala. But then he shifted. But success is a hollow metric if it costs us our humanity. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the script. Richard shifted in his seat, frowning slightly. He leaned over to the man next to him and whispered, something Arthur couldn't hear but could guess. What is he doing? The tension in the room changed. It wasn't just anticipation anymore. It was confusion. They were waiting for the attack, and he was talking about philosophy. Arthur continued, his eyes scanning the room, but deliberately avoiding Elena for now. I have spent 30 years building an empire. I have signed deals that changed markets. I have won every battle I have fought. He stopped. He looked down at his hands. But I have lost things along the way. Things that cannot be recovered with money. Things that cannot be litigated in a court. He looked up again, his gaze sweeping over the room, intense and unflinching. We all make mistakes. We all fail. And how we handle those failures defines us more than our successes ever could. Elena finally looked up. Her eyes met his. There was terror in them, but also a flicker of confusion. She was waiting for the pivot. She was waiting for him to say, my wife failed me. She was waiting for him to say, my friend betrayed me. But he didn't. He just stood there, a monument of calm in the center of the storm. Julian was somewhere in the back. Arthur could feel his presence like a cold spot in the room. He knew Julian was sweating. He knew Julian was checking the exits, wondering if security was waiting to escort him out. The entire room knew why this speech was happening. The rumors had circulated all week. The affair was an open secret, whispered in corners and typed into headlines. Everyone was waiting for Arthur to validate the gossip, to turn the whisper into a shout. I know there are rumors, Arthur said. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I know there are stories about my family, about my marriage. Elena flinched. It was a small movement, but Arthur saw it. She closed her eyes for a second, bracing herself. And I know that many of you are waiting for me to address them, to name names, to assign blame. Richard sat up straighter. This was it, the moment of execution. He glanced at Elena with a look of pity mixed with triumph. The crowd leaned in further. The cameras in the back zoomed in, the lenses clicking softly. Arthur placed his hands flat on the podium. But I will not do that. The reaction was instantaneous. A collective intake of breath. A shuffle of feet. Someone dropped a fork in the back, the clatter sounding like a gunshot. Richard's mouth opened slightly. Elena's eyes flew open, wide with shock. She stared at him, uncomprehending. He wasn't going to do it. He wasn't going to destroy them. I will not use this platform to humiliate anyone, Arthur continued, his voice gaining strength. I will not use my pain as a weapon. Because if I do that, I become something I do not recognize. I become a man who destroys rather than builds. He looked directly at Elena now. His gaze was not angry. It was sad. It was resolved. Marriage is not a contract of ownership. It is a partnership of choice. And sometimes choices change. Sometimes people drift. And sometimes the love that once was becomes something else. Elena's breath hitched. A tear slipped down her cheek, catching the light from the chandelier above. She didn't wipe it away. She was frozen, caught in the gravity of his words. He was acknowledging the end, but he was doing it with grace. He was giving her dignity when she expected disgrace. There is no villain in this story, Arthur said. The murmurs started again, louder this time. Disbelief. Disagreement. There are only people who tried their best and fell short. Including me. He paused. He let that hang. He was taking responsibility. He was sharing the blame. The crowd was unsettled. They wanted a villain. They wanted to pick a side. Arthur was.